Hi everybody, this is Spring, the fiber enthusiast. Welcome to my channel, and if you're looking for something crochet, I'm sorry, today is a knitting tutorial. But keep an eye out if this is your first time here. I have crocheted, knitting, tatting, multiple other things like spinning yarn, weaving, all kinds of stuff here. So go ahead and poke around if that's something that you're interested in, one of those. Today's tutorial is discussing color work. Now, everybody is going to have their own little niche that works best for them. I'm going to give you the basics that I learned and how I learned to do color work. This is a hat that I designed by using a grid pattern for both of these. This came from a grid pattern that I had seen, this particular thing, and I think it was for like I want to say a cardigan. I can't remember exactly where, but I took the grid and incorporated it into my hat. The same thing with the heart. The heart was something else that I found somewhere, and it was just a small sample of this heart. They're very easy to do, to work up on your own. If you have something in mind, you want to get yourself a piece of graph paper. And I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way. And when you get your graph paper, you're going to take, and each stitch is going to account for one or more stitches, depending on whether you're crocheting, knitting, how big or small you want the pattern to be. Obviously, if you're doing the back of a cardigan, you're not going to want a piece of graph paper that size. So what you would do is each block would represent, 4 or 5 stitches, or maybe more, or whatever, to account for the amount of stitches in your pattern. This particular book is a crochet journal, but this is how I can use it as a knitting journal. It has a place for me to write notes and write the pattern, what yarn I use, place to put all the details. And the only thing I would do is change the hook size to needle size, basically. So just because it says crochet doesn't mean you can't use it for knitting or whatever you want. So this is the heart I just showed you, but in a bigger form. And what I did was I take my highlighter, and for this particular pattern, each block represents one stitch. So here's my pretend hat. I went ahead and did a 2x2 ribbing on the hat. It's 80 stitches around. I am now where I'm at the beginning here of the next round. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and knit all the way around, and then I will come back and we will start our color work pattern. Okay, so I have made one complete round of just knit stitch all the way around, no purling. And the reason I do that is I just like to have knit stitches to work from right from the beginning. It looks cleaner to me. It's not a necessity, it's just what I do. So let me shove this under some yarn here. Okay. So this heart is 16 stitches at its widest point, because each little tiny block is 1 stitch. So at its widest point, it's 16 stitches. Well, 16 goes into 80 5 times. And if I'm looking to do a hat and I'm looking at the circumference, and I take my hand and say, okay, it goes 5 times. And if I'm looking to go all the way around the hat and I say, ooh, I could get it 3 times around the hat with a group of 16 stitches in between. Well, that would only be between this one and this one, there would be 16 stitches. But between this one and this one, there wouldn't be 16 stitches. They would be back to back. So that wouldn't work out equally. So I say, okay, let's do 2 times. Well, if I did 2 times, then I would have a heart here, and I would have 2 sets of 16 stitches, a big wide section of no heart, because there's not enough room there to separate it out. So when you're figuring out how to work your pattern, that's where the math comes in, and you take the amount of stitches and then how wide you want your pattern to be, or how many stitches it's going to work up. You have to do it so that way, if you're working in a circumference, in a circle, you can separate them evenly with an even amount of sections of no color work between them, unless it's a continuous pattern. So the best scenario for this would to be either have one on the front and the back, or one on each side, and even the stitches out, or to just put one heart on it, period. That's it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just do one. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stitch over to the very bottom of my heart. Well, I know that it's 16 stitches across, so I know that there's going to be 16 stitches in from the side, at least 16 stitches. Then I'm going to go, okay, so here's 15 and then an extra one, because each one of these blocks is 5 stitches. So I know that that's my 16 mark. Then I'm going to count over to where the bottom of my heart starts here, and there's 5, 6, 7. So that's when I will go, okay, so I'm going to go 16, 21, 22, 23 stitches all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead with the same color that I have. I'm not going to pick up the new color until I'm ready to start the heart. Again, some may start the color right at the beginning, so all the tails are in the same place. This is just how I do it. You find what works best for you, and that's what you do. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, there's my 16. Now we need 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so there we're at our starting point of our heart. And you can put this wherever you want. I just happen to choose to go from my starting point here because that's what works for me and makes it easier for me to remember that I'm counting from my starting point of the next round. So that's entirely up to you. If you want the start and end spot of your hat to be on the back of your head, then you would adjust where you start your color work. Okay, let me get some contrasting colored yarn here so that way we can work up our heart. And if you're wondering what yarn I'm using, it's not, pertinent as far as what we're doing here. But If you're wanting to know, I'm using Karen Simply Soft in the colorways Blanca and Orchard. Or let me see. Wait. Yeah, Orchard. Okay. So now I'm to the point where I start the bottom of the heart. And the bottom of the heart is 2 stitches in the contrasting color, which is this lavendery orchard color. So now I'm going to pick up that new color, the contrasting color, and I'm going to knit those 2 stitches. And we're working in the round. These are just knit stitches, and this is for this particular pattern. Okay. Now here's where the fun begins. We need to carry this lavender color all the way around every single round until the heart is completed. And we need to do it so that way we have what's called floats on the inside of our work. Those floats cannot be any longer than 6 stitches. The longer the floats are, the more of a problem you're going to have with tension. I personally try to stick with 5 so that way those floats are shorter and the tension stays better. So now I'm going to bring up both threads or both yarn in my hand. And now I'm going to knit with the main color, color A. Let's go A and B, main color, contrasting color. Some say alternate color. But for the sake of this, we'll do color A and color B. Color A is white, color B is lavender. So with color A, I'm going to knit 5 stitches. So I just pick up and knit 5 stitches. Okay, so here's my 5 stitches. And now what we need to do is twist our yarn, and I will zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. We need to twist our yarn in such fashion your next stitch is holding that purple yarn from falling. So if I was to make my next stitch like this, the yarn is going to be right there being held by this loop, which would be the purl side of the stitch. And this section here is called the float. So that's what we're going to do. Pull my yarn back up. And how I like to do it is stretch those stitches out. Bring my color A around to knit. And before I let it pop off of my needle, I make sure that my float isn't like this. Get that out of the way. It's not like really loose and just hanging, because that's going to change your tension. And the next thing you want to make sure of is that it's not too tight. If it's too tight, when you finish the project, you're going to have puckers where your sections are like this. They're all puckered up. And there will be no stretch or give when the hat or item is put on the body. You won't have any slack in it at all for that item to stretch where it should be stretching. So that's what I like to do. I like to make sure there's a good amount of stretch between my stitches, not overly stretched, but a good amount. Make sure that the float isn't too loose or too tight. And now I'm going to go ahead and pop that stitch off. Okay? And we're going to work another 4 stitches, because that was 1. We're going to work another 4 stitches, and we'll do that again. So color A, 4 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that will give us 5 stitches that we have worked past our float or our twist in the yarn. Now I also have been asked, how do I keep up with my yarn when I'm working and keep it from being all twisted when I'm working with it? Because see, now I have twisted it by putting one over the other. I'm going to zoom out just a little, pull this back up in my hand, and I have that twist in front of my finger with the proper color going the proper direction as where the working ball of yarn is. So now I know that if I twist it again and I don't know where my working yarn is, it's going to be continually spinning around each other. To untwist and keep it from doing that and keep a nice even tension and not have the yarn wrapping around each other, every time I bring it like this, I know that's the direction they need to go. And that's how I will knit the next stitch. It's already looped around. So now I'm going to go ahead and knit my next stitch with color A. And again, before I take it off, this is going extra, extra slow. Before I take it off the needle, I'm going to want to check and make sure that there's still enough give, that the float isn't too loose or too taut. Make sure everything is nice and neat. And now we have the proper color on the right side and the left side to the proper working ball of yarn. It's all on the exact same side. And now I'll go ahead and slide that stitch off. And I'll work 4 more stitches and I'll do that again. So that was 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? And then we just do it again and we continue doing this all the way around. So here we are, we have our yarn going the right direction. We're going to cross them over. So now our lavender is over the top of our working yarn that we're actually knitting with, color A. It's over the top of it, and we're going to bring that color A back up and work the next stitch. Just like that. And make sure that you have plenty of room, but not too much. You want to have that stretch. So go ahead and continue working around your hat. And the next time I twist, I'll twist like this and put the yarns back on their proper side. So every other stitch, I'm fixing the yarn that I'm working with. I keep untwisting it every other time I have to wrap one around the other. I'm actually undoing the twist I put it in from the previous one. Okay, so we'll go a little bit quicker and we'll go ahead and continue working around the hat. And if it's easier for you to drop a color and pick it back up and drop a color and pick it back up, you can do that too. I just happen to have been doing this for a little while and feel comfortable working with 2 strands of yarn or even more across my finger holding tension. Okay, So there's my next one. And now I'm going to do another float. Which all I'm doing is I know that I need this one. So I'm just reaching around it and grabbing it. Might be a little confusing when you first start, but once you get the hang of it, you kind of just, it becomes a natural thing for a lot of people when they start this. It's just getting to this point where you can start working around with your different colors. So there's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, I'm going to be untwisting. And I just keep an eye, you know, and make sure that I have not too much. With this long stretch, you just got to kind of make sure that you check it every now and again and make sure it's not too tight. So go ahead and continue working back around, and I will meet up with you when I'm getting into this next section from the end of the round, starting the next round. And I'll be right back. We're almost there. So we're back to the beginning of the row. I'm going to slip my stitch marker as I come to it. And now I know I need to go and count back 1 stitch from the previous one. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we're going to switch our yarn so that way it's still keeping the same switcheroo there every 5 stitches. Okay, there's 10. It's 11. Okay. Okay, so I'm 2 stitches before where my lavender, my color B started. I'm going to do 1 more. And according to my pattern, I'm adding an extra one on each side. So instead of 2 stitches, we now need 4 in color B. So I'll pick up my yarn, make sure my floats are all good. And there'll be a little bit of this going on when it's all squished together. Don't worry, it's okay. When you get it off your needles and stretch it out, it works out fine. You just don't want it to be all bulked up right here when you have the distance between the two. You want to make sure your tension is good. Okay, so color B. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So because it's only 4 stitches, we're still good to just knit across. The next time we'll have to switch and put a twist so that way the white can carry over. Color A can carry over. because next time there'll be 6 stitches in this colorway. So now we're going to carry on around the hat, switching back and forth, moving one yarn around the other, and then back around every 5 stitches. Go ahead and continue working around just as I showed you in the last round. Go ahead and continue working all the way around, switching, creating these floats, making sure they're not too tight and not too loose. And we'll come back and start the next round together. Okay, so we're now on the next row, which according to the pattern, we now have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. So an extra stitch on either side of the previous 4. So we continue working around to that point, 1 stitch before the color change, and do your color change. So I'm going to go ahead and 3, 4, and 5. Pick back up on that color. Oops. Sometimes it's good to have a bunch of fingers. Sometimes they get in the way and sometimes they don't. Okay, so I'm going to keep working my way across until I'm 1 stitch prior to where I need to change colors. It's 5. When I work a pattern, I do all kinds of things trying to find an easy way, the easiest way that works for me. So you may see like where I've dropped one of the colors and picked back up on it later. It all depends on what happens to be working for me at the moment. It's 4 and 5. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch, which is what I just did in my hand. I want that yarn to go over the top, so I just switched it in my hand, and I'll pick it up like that. There's all kinds of ways to do this. That's just another way you can wrap your yarn using your hands and never dropping your yarn. You do have a tendency to twist a lot that way. So it's 4. Okay, still got room. 5. 2 stitches before. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that one. Now we need to pick up on our color B. And because it's 6 stitches across, we need to do the same thing we've been doing with these floats, but now we're floating the color A during our color B part of the pattern. So I'm going to pick up color B and knit 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I'm just going to switch them 2 around so that way my color A is wrapped around color B, and knit 2 more. 4, 5, and 6. And just like with color B floats, we want to make sure our color A floats across the same way, not too tight and not too, loose. Okay. So now we pick back up on color A and work our way around, creating these floats as we go. And after we have done that, I will meet back up with you and we'll do just another couple of rounds of this pattern. Like I said, this isn't a tutorial on the hat pattern or the whole heart. This is on how to do color work and how to work up a pattern and figure out how many stitches and things of that nature, more so than an actual tutorial on how to make a knitted hat with a heart in it. This is just merely a suggestion to show you how I work things for color work. Okay, so I'm back to the beginning here. And again, we're going to be adding one extra stitch. So we will have 8 stitches across in the contrasting color of color B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right here is 8. Here. So it is 1 before our previous one. This was our first block on our last, let's zoom in. This was our first block on our last row, and this was our last block on our last row. So now we need to add 1 on either side of those stitches to make it 8 across. Okay, so I will continue working over to 1 before my contrasting color, color B. Okay, so that actually worked out pretty good because now I have to pick up for color B, and it happened to be where I would normally switch to lock them together. So that worked out good. So because we have 8 stitches, we do need to cross those colors again at some point within 5 stitches across. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now we're going to switch those 2 around so that way they're locked together, and stitch those last 2 of color B. And now we'll switch back. We are. We'll switch back to color A and continue working around, creating our floats like we have been doing. And we'll work our way back around to our color B here, where we start our color B. So that is all there is to working color work. It's just a matter of getting used to your tension. This is how you can work up a grid pattern. And you can do it with letters. Like say I wanted to make an L, I could go up 1, across 2, and then up 3 and across, and then finish filling it in. So I have 3 crossed and 4 up. And the same thing with an O. You would say you want to keep this open, and then you just create your blocks across. 3 down, 3 across, 3 up, and work it across like that. So that's just the basics of it. This is how I work Colorwork and how to manage your floats around. When you start getting into a lot of colors, it gets a little bit more complicated. There's a lot in your hand that you're dealing with. But the main thing is to make sure that your tension, when, say, this item is stretched out to be on a head, your tension is the same. So I hope this was a helpful tutorial on how to get started doing some color work and playing with knitted color work, and how to understand how to make a graph on some graph paper. And hopefully there's enough information here that you can do something of your own. If you do, I'd love to see it. Please, if you have Facebook, come on over and join our Facebook group. The link is down in the description box. If you don't have Facebook and you have Instagram, you can also tag me in Instagram. My link to the Instagram and my Instagram handle is down in the description box as well. And if you don't have either of them and you say, well, I still want to join, my email is down in the description box also. You can email me a picture. How about that? If you have any questions or concerns, suggestions would be absolutely greatly appreciated. Or just want to chit chat, you can find me at any of those places and let me know. So until next time, everybody, be blessed and be a blessing. Bye for now.